Thanks for watching today's video. We're going to have a quick chat about different tips, a little bit about knowing your shaft, and a little bit about hard stepping and soft stepping, which I get asked about quite a bit. So the first thing we've got to understand is what size is your tip and whether it's parallel or taper or the construction of it. So just quickly, we have basically two types of shafts. As we can see up here, we have a parallel, which basically means the walls are parallel, okay? We also have a taper, which will go out like such. It gets wider as the shaft goes up. Okay, now taper tip shafts are usually 0.355. That's 0.355 of 1 inch, about 1/3 of an inch. A parallel in an iron is usually 370. So that would usually be an iron, or a 335 in a wood. Okay, now obviously there's steps in shafts, right? So there'll be a step at some point. And so we need to know, nice drawing, but we need to know the length of the parallel section. Okay, so we're gonna have a quick look at a couple of parallel shafts. We've got, this is a parallel iron shaft. It's 370 tip, okay? And this is basically a one size fits all, okay? And by that I mean, it's currently a 2-iron shaft. If I want it to be a 3-iron shaft, I take a 1/2 inch off, cut it. If I want it to be a 4, I take 1 inch off, I cut it. All the way down to a pitching wedge, I take 4 inches, I cut 4 inches off this shaft, and that makes it a pitching wedge shaft. Okay, that's how a parallel shaft works. So to make a set of shafts, we just need one, and we cut it. Now that's a thing called trimming instructions. All manufacturers are different, but when I look, for example, I go to the Fujikura catalog and I want to know how long, because I can't just keep cutting it. At some point, this gets thicker. Okay. I look in the instructions, don't know if you can see that in there, but it says here, you see that okay? Parallel tip length, 6.0. So it's got 6 inches of parallel tip length, okay? So cutting it 4 inches for a wedge, no problem at all. Now wood is a similar principle. And so if I grab a Ventus, for example, now for a driver, standard driver installation, we put it straight in. Standard 3-wood, we'd put it straight in. But then there's also trimming instructions on this, and there's also a parallel tip or a parallel length. So we go, again, we revert back to the catalog, and we have Ventus, and again, just come in here nice and close. You can see parallel tip length is 3 inches on a wood shaft. They're all different. They're all different. We also have, usually at the back of this one, I'm not sure about everyone else's catalog, but they'll have trimming instructions, okay? So if we look in here, woods, Fujikura, all woods, no tip trimming for driver and 3-wood. When we get to 5-wood, we tip trim 1/2 inch, 7-wood 1 inch, okay? Now with hybrids, they give you the loft as to how much you would trim. And then with the irons, like I said, trim 1/2 inch starting with 3 irons. So, and then butt trim to final length. So butt is the handle end. Okay. So with parallel shafts, we trim them to try and get the right flex. Okay. Now with a taper tip, we have a different scenario. You imagine you had to put a taper tip shaft in, and if we, with this, like with the parallel, we could cut it here, it's still parallel, still parallel, still parallel. These distances are still the same. But with a taper tip shaft, if we cut it, it's now wider. And then if we cut it again, it's wider to the point where it won't fit into the hosel. Okay, now, so if I grab a taper tip Mizuno iron, right? basically the parallel shaft, it won't go in there. It doesn't fit. Now if I grab a taper tip shaft, it goes in. Okay, it fits in nicely. Now if I was to cut that, and to be honest, you can cut them 1/2 inch, okay? You could cut a taper tip shaft 1/2 inch and it'd still fit in okay. But any more than that and it starts to not fit, right? So the difference between our parallel shaft and our taper shaft is that the taper shafts come in numbers. And if I had 2 full sets out here, I'd show you. But basically here we've got Modus. This is Nippon Modus in a 120X. And I've put some tape on just above the bottom step, just to show you where these steps start. So there's a 9-iron, an 8-iron, and a 7-iron. And here's the 120 stiff, 9-iron, 8-iron, 7-iron, same thing. Okay, I've just put some tape on there just to show you where the steps are. Now the reason they do this, there's a couple of reasons, and I'm not the shaft manufacturer, I can only go on what I know. See you, Ventus. But basically we have, if you think about this, with the parallel shaft, the minute we cut it, it gets a little lighter. Okay. With the taper tip shafts, it's a constant weight. So in a Modus 120 extra stiff, it's 120 grams. In a stiff, it's 114 grams. Doesn't matter which number you pick up, the 4-iron, the pitching wedge, they're the same weight. So in order to build 7 clubs, the manufacturer has to make 7 shafts. It's more difficult, but they're more precise. They fit snugger into the heads generally. And so most of the high quality stuff will come in taper tip, right? So there's your basic rundown of what's parallel, what's taper. You've got parallel and taper in irons. Your woods are definitely parallel, okay? So now we move on to what is hard stepping. We'll start with hard stepping. Now hard stepping and tip trimming is the same thing. So I'm going to pick the Ventus up off the ground that I dropped. And you'll hear sometimes they say, you know, this Tour Pro plays a Ventus 6TX, tip trimmed 1 inch. So what that does is they cut 1 inch off the end and it makes it play stiffer. That's what it does. Okay, so tip trimming is going to make the shaft play stiffer. So if the shaft spins a little bit too much for you, or the flight's a little higher, for whatever reason, you know, your speed's too great, you can tip trim a shaft and it will make it play a little stiffer. Now, once you've gone up, you know, we're in a Ventus 6TX here, you can't just grab the next flex up because that's it. That's as stiff as it gets. You could go heavier, which would be stiffer, but you can then start tip trimming up to, there's 3 inches of parallel section. Now you've got to still stick it in the adapter in the head, so you know, tipping more than about 2 inches not recommended. So that's what we talk about tip trimming, okay? And you know that this person's got it tipped. Now you can do the same with your irons. Like I said, with and we call it either tip trimming or we call it hard stepping. Okay, so we're going to talk about an 8-iron. So if I'm over here and I've got a 7, 8, 9-iron, if I cut that 8-iron at the bottom 1/2 inch, it basically just becomes an iron. There's a 1/2 inch there, right? So in order to hard step an iron, all I do is put the 9-iron shaft into the 8-iron. That's what we call hard stepping. Okay? So instead of cutting at the tip end and potentially having the shaft not fit the head anymore, we basically just put the 9 iron into the 8 iron, okay? And then the 8 iron shaft goes into the 7 iron, and the 7 iron goes into the 6 iron, because basically the higher the number, the stiffer the shaft is. So the 9 iron shaft is slightly stiffer than the 8, stiffer than the 7, which is then stiffer than the 6, and so on and so forth. So to hard step, you put the 9 iron in the 8 iron. Now, again, why would you do that? It's the same principle with a driver shaft. You might find, oh, these things are spinning a little bit too much, or, you know, it's not far off and they just need a minor adjustment. So we go hard step. Now, conversely, what's a soft step? A soft step is when we're going to go the other way. So we're going to put the 7 iron shaft into the 8 iron. 7 into the 8 iron, 8 iron into 9 iron, 9 iron into wedge. Okay, and that's what we call a soft step. Now, why would you soft step? Why not just go down from X to stiff? The basic principle here's a basic principle. And this is not the same for every manufacturer, and it's not an exact science, okay? But the basic principle is this. Now I've got the 9 iron in X and the 9 iron in stiff. And the bottom step, it's about an inch difference. Now when we go soft step, we kind of get the flex in between. Okay, so, you know, some people aren't quite, and I'm talking stiff and X here, but the same applies for regular and stiff. I get people who are all the time, they're in between stiff and regular. So what do? You can hard step the regular, which makes it a bit stiffer, or you can soft step the stiff, which makes it a bit softer. And they find a spot in the middle. You know, some manufacturers have brought out a shaft called an SR, a stiff regular. Some people call it soft regular, which is quite confusing. But quite often there is a flex in between stiff and regular. And that fits, you know, quite a few people. But in order to, you know, if you can't find a product with an SR, and it's generally not stocked, you know, you can go soft step the stiff or hard step the regular, and you'll get that in between flex. Okay, so for example, I know it gets a bit confusing, but to soft step the X would be to put the 7 iron into the 9. Okay, so we would grab 7 iron into the 8. So we grab the 7 iron of the X, or alternatively, we'd grab the 9 iron in the stiff. Right, and you'll see that these bottom steps, and it's not an exact science with the bottom step, but these two are coming out as similar flex. Sorry, well, I mean, they will come out at a similar flex, right? But this is kind of the in-between flex. So soft stepped 7 iron, which is an extra stiff, or the hard stepped 9 iron in the stiff, right? And you put both of those shafts in an 8 iron, and they'll come out at a similar flex. It's not, again, it's not an exact science, but if you're one of those people that is in between S and X, or in between regular and stiff, you can hard step or soft step, right? Now, you can do a double hard step, which might take it to the full next flex. Again, these are all different, and we're not talking in absolutes, but it's just giving you an idea. I've had a couple of people recently call up and say, "Oh, I'm kind of in between stiff and regular. I'm not quite, you know, even with my driver speed, I'm at 95." So you might go, well, unfortunately with a wood shaft you can't soft step because you can't make it any longer, right, in the tip. but you could hard step a regular, tip trim a regular, or the same with the irons. You could definitely go and put a regular 9-iron shaft into your 8-iron, which is going to make it that little bit stiffer and might just get that in between flex. So hopefully I've given you a little bit of an insight into what's hard stepping and soft stepping and why do we do it, and the difference between those parallel and taper tip shafts. So if I haven't covered anything, I do apologize. And if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to comment below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching today's video. Make sure you click on like and subscribe. Let us know if there's anything else you'd like to see, and we'll see you in the next video.